Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us from wherever in the world you are tuning in from. My name is Ikenna Azuike, and it is my pleasure to be your host for the CAS Talks, a channel dedicated to discussing and dissecting all of the issues related to the Climate Adaptation Summit 2021. And we'll be getting off to a start in a minute by warming up, or rather building up to the grand high-level opening of the CAS Summit. And then we'll go into the how. How did this summit actually come into being? And why is it so important, especially now more than ever? And then we'll talk about the soft launch of the Global Centre on Adaptation, a floating office no less, in Rotterdam. So it's a pretty full program. I hope you have a cup of tea handy and perhaps a chocolate biscuit or two, maybe six, because it's going to be a cozy next 45 minutes. Right, I have at the table with me, first of all, the Vice Minister of Infrastructure and Water Management, Mr. Roald Lapperre. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Good. And next to me also two CAS 2021 youth reporters.
Yes.
Now I can tell you guys, when I heard that we needed youth reporters, I decided, okay, I'm going to search far and wide for the most brilliant, the brightest, and just perfect youth reporters I could find. Unfortunately, I couldn't get anyone, so Hajar and Vicky just, they showed up.
Oh my God. Maybe for clarification for people, Ikenna and I, we know each other from the Youth at Heart Forum.
I told you I'd get you back.
Yeah, and I made a lot of fun for him about his age, so I guess this is my revenge.
Yeah, I'm officially, I'm also a youth representative,
obviously,
right?
I mean,
right?
Yeah.
As so we are, aren't we, Mr. Lapperre?
I feel young.
Good.
Yeah, Youth at
That's
Heart,
a good
right?
sign.
Yeah, Youth at Heart.
Nice.
Okay, so Hajar already mentioned it. You were my co-host at the Youth at Heart Summit, which was another initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs last year, and you were the UN Youth Representative for the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Vicky, you're something of a jack of all trades. You started off as an intern at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes.
Working across MHPSS, mental health and psychosocial support. And of course, now you've done a lot in relation to the Climate Adaptation Summit. So Vicky, Scheick, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Hajar, Youth at Heart, that was all about putting young people at the heart of the decisions that affect their lives.
Yeah.
And now you're here again. So mission accomplished for Youth at Heart, would you say?
Well, I definitely say it's a really good step in the right direction. I mean, so many times people always say young people, they are the future of the world. But what we often tend to forget is that we're not just the future as young people, but we're also the present. We're already here. We see that young people are coming up with so many inspiring and hopeful initiatives when it comes to climate adaptation. So I guess what's also important to keep in mind that we should already include them now and not just see them as this future agent that needs to be included in that sense.
Yep, spot on. And Vicky, as a youth representative yourself, what are you thinking about this summit? Are there particular sessions you're looking forward to?
Oh yeah, really. The resilient cities. I live in a city, in The Hague, and so I see how much it affects the city. So like flooding or heat stress, that are kind of big issues in the cities. So I'm really looking forward to that session.
Great, good. All right. Before we start our first conversation, though, don't forget, you guys, this is an interactive conference. We would love you to engage with us. And you can do that via the chat function on the CAS platform. Or, of course, you can use the hashtag on Twitter, which is Adaptation Summit. So be sure to ask your questions. If you have feedback, if you have compliments, feel free to tag me. If you have any complaints, Vicky and Hajar.
Oh, wow.
Vicky and Hajar.
Never making jokes about you again, Ikenna. You won. Nice.
Okay, onto the serious business of climate adaptation with you, Mr. Lapperre. Perhaps though I can start with asking you to help me clarify something. What is the difference between climate adaptation and climate mitigation?
Well, mitigation is about prevention, and adaptation is about coping with reality we see on the ground every day already.
Yeah.
So mitigation, I think, is a matter of limiting global warming.
Yeah.
Preferably, of course, well below the 2 degrees as agreed in Paris. Because right now we're on course to a full 3-degree global rise in temperature. We need to prevent that, and we can do so by reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
And that's something we should all work on. At the same time, as you said, it's not adaptation, like youth, is not something for the future. It's there already, and we have to cope with it today. So adaptation is a matter of dealing what we have at our hands already. The 6th hottest year in history have all occurred since 2014.
Yeah.
So we need to deal with that with more frequent and more intense hurricanes, cyclones, droughts, floods, heat waves. So that is, I think, what adaptation is all about, and what this conference is all about, because it's something we can work on already, and we must work on already.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned it there, the extreme weather events that can happen as a result of our planet heating up. And often it's the most vulnerable communities in the world that are at the sharp end of those climate events. I'd like, first of all, let's run a video, which is some statements from the Deputy Speaker of the Houses of Parliament in the Philippines, and she's one of the 31 commissioners of the Global Commission on Adaptation, coming from a region of the world where the hurricanes in the Philippines have been devastating. Let's hear what she has to say.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to join all of you in this Climate Adaptation Summit talks. I accepted the invitation to be a commissioner of the Global Commission on Adaptation in 2018 because I believe in the potential of this cooperation platform of world leaders to be a global force in pushing for accelerated efforts and investments on adaptation. We aim to inspire governments, the corporate sector, and industry leaders, community leaders, investors, and all stakeholders to act with much better resolve and commitment, and to invest on the resilience of our people, our countries, and planet against the global climate crisis. We know that we could tip the balance in favor of continued sustainable development growth and inclusive prosperity, even in an increasingly warming world. Over these years, we've endured devastating super typhoons, which I know so well in my country, and hurricanes, massive flooding, which we have even without a typhoon, raging wildfires in many parts of the world, and intense droughts and heat waves. We recall that the year 2020 as a year that brought us COVID-19, but it is also the year that's virtually tied to 2016 as the warmest year ever on record. How much worse could we actually withstand? How many more lives to lose and suffer as this planet continues to get warmer? How much more of our children's chances for a safe and habitable future do we ruin? When we say adaptation, we know that it's really a matter of life and death. It means being able to protect our people and their means to live and prosper, and to transform our societies to be better equipped to deal with the increasing risks and challenges from climate change. As we published our flagship report, without adaptation, 500 million small farms around the world will be most affected by decreased yields. 3.6 to more than 5 billion may lack sufficient water. Hundreds of millions of people could be displaced, and more than 100 million people in developing nations could be pushed below the poverty line. But we also reported that investing $1.8 trillion in early warning systems, in infrastructure, in improved dryland, agriculture crop production, mangrove protection, and water resilience. From 2020 to 2030, in this decade of ecosystem rehabilitation and generation, it could generate 7.1 trillion US dollars in total net benefits. So, what's stopping us from investing on adaptation, on resilience? When we also say adaptation, we also mean mitigation. It can be said that mitigation is the best form of adaptation because it minimizes the scale and the magnitude of climate impacts to which we need to adapt. Taking deep and drastic cuts to greenhouse gas emissions will help limit global warming and climate change. We therefore need to bring our discussions and insights here to other global and national climate conferences and talks, most especially in COP26 this year in November. Postponed from last year, this COP26 will hopefully work towards the achievement of the Paris goals in limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as well as in the provision of climate finance, technologies, and capacity development support for developing nations like mine. From this year until 2030 is an extremely crucial decade for our fight for survival. This decade is a deadline that our scientists have declared as the closing of the window of opportunity to deflect the catastrophic effects of climate change. We need to make up for delays and for lost time on our global pace on climate action due to COVID-19 and actually recognize the opportunity of pursuing climate resilience as we promote a sustainable pandemic recovery. Economic disruptions and public health emergencies will happen again and again if we do not consider and address the climate crisis as much bigger threat than COVID-19. We need to continue rallying behind the science and to amplify the voices of our youths and the vulnerable population. We need to continue engaging governments, national and local, the private sector, the corporate sector and academia, the scientists and the experts, and the community leaders and civil society to actually work together on how we could further adapt our world within this crucial decade and beyond. Thank you once again. A resilient, happy, sustainable New Year to us all.
Thank you very much. What an optimistic and hopeful video from Mrs. Legarda. Although, yeah, there's clearly a lot of work for us to do. Mr. Lapperre, we heard Deputy Speaker Legarda talk there about the Global Commission on Adaptation. Can you describe what sort of institution that is?
Well, the Global Commission on Adaptation started its work over 2 years ago at the initiative of the Netherlands government because we believed that the Global Commission was necessary to really elevate adaptation to the highest level in every country. Mm-hmm. And I think today this summit shows that that is exactly what has happened in the past 2 years. Yeah. In addition to the Global Commission, we took the initiative to set up a global center on adaptation, which I think is as important. Absolutely, and that is the perfect bridge, thank you very much, to talk about the two guests who have joined us at the table. The Mayor, Ahmed Aboutaleb, you are the Mayor of Rotterdam, no less, and Nanne de Ru, the architect of the Global Center on Adaptation Floating Office, which I mentioned in the introduction. But perhaps you can first of all tell us, enlighten us, Mr. de Ru, what is climate adaptive building, which I think the Floating Office is a perfect example of?
Very good question, thank you very much. Climate adaptive building is really that you think about how can buildings adapt to climate change. Normally when you design a building, you assume that the climate will always stay the same. Now that we see that climate is changing, we need to think about how we can adapt. A good example, of course, is rising sea levels. And in Rotterdam, we are, of course, confronted with a continuous interaction with water. And we thought it would be a great idea to try to see if we could make a floating office. Of course, there are many floating buildings in the world, but an office of this size has never been done before. So we're very proud that it's the largest floating office in the world.
Fantastic. And you must be very proud as well.
Yes, sir. We have been contributing in paying for the office as a city. And funny enough, normally you have, when you ask the city council to agree for 1 or 2 million euros, a lot of debates, but not in this case. I think it's a matter of pride that the city, together with the province of South Holland and the Netherlands government, really accepted such a building, iconic places on the water of Rotterdam, to show the world how it is to have a building that is really going up and down with tides.
So there's a secret now to, if you want a new office financed, well, you just need to put it on water, and then Rotterdam is just going to be like, here's the money.
On one of the largest conferences in Singapore a couple of years ago, I said, it's maybe a bit arrogant, but I said, if you are looking really for technology to build on water or next to the water, come to Rotterdam to see how it works, because if we don't have that technology in Rotterdam and the Netherlands, probably doesn't exist.
Wow, I love to hear that.
Yeah.
As BV Nederland, as they say over here, right?
That's a bit arrogant, but I mean, just exaggerating to showcase that really the Netherlands has a huge experience with water. I mean, one of the parts of my city, just at the east, is minus 6 meters below sea level. Minus 6 meters, to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the city if one of those dikes breaks?
Yeah.
It's amazing danger.
And let me ask the architect, what does that mean? How would that impact your floating office then?
Well, in the case of our floating office, we will be the one gently floating above the catastrophe. But I think another part of our building is not only about adapting to climate change, but it's also about making sure the building itself is generating energy. And most buildings cost energy to use, and our building has actually a system which allows it to actually produce energy for the city. Yeah.
And can you describe some of the other sustainable innovations? I understand.
Yes, I think there's a really cool feature which is that we use the pontons on which the building is floating. We use it to cool the building. So we use the temperature of the water from the harbor to actually cool the office building. I think that's also a really a neat innovation that we actually managed to put into this building.
Absolutely. And of course you have solar panels on there, I assume.
Yeah, we have 900 square meters of solar panels, and they generate so much energy that the whole building can also be used sustainably.
And a green roof.
Yes.
And a green roof.
Yeah.
900 meters of square meters of solar panel. What does that look like? I'm a fan of always like comparing. That's like a football field, or is that half a football field?
It's basically half a football field.
Half a football field of an office on water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yes, and I think the last part of the office, which is also interesting to mention, is that the building itself is actually circular, which means that the whole structure is made of wood. It's a dry construction method. All the structure is actually screwed together and can actually be taken apart again. So let's say in 20, 30 years we would like to do something else with this building. We can actually entirely dismantle it and use it in another way.
Incredible.
It's not built on the spot. It's built in a factory.
Yeah.
And then it's taken on a pontoon over the water to the location, and then has been fixed over there.
Yeah, assembled.
There's so much build-up. We now need to see this.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's run a video of the Global Center on Adaptation Floating Office.
How do we make an office building that can adapt to climate change? And how do we make a building that is energy self-sufficient and carbon neutral? The Global Center on Adaptation, the GCA, is an international organization working on accelerating climate adaptation. The GCA fulfills this role worldwide from its regional offices in various countries, and also from its new headquarters in Rotterdam. For that, we are making a new type of building. The new headquarters of the GCA floats on the water in the harbor area of Rotterdam, adapting to changing sea levels. It is energy neutral and is built entirely out of timber. It generates its own energy through solar panels and receives its cooling from the water of the harbor. It is a building ready for the circular economy. And it represents how Rotterdam tackles the climate challenges with bold ideas and with cooperation between citizens, governments and businesses. We made a building that represents our ideals for a climate adaptive future, and we named it Floating Office Rotterdam. Floating Office Rotterdam aims to be an icon of resilience by design, matching the ambitions of its hometown, Rotterdam. It is a proof that we can do things differently today, when we push the boundaries of what we know and what we can. Floating Office Rotterdam, welcoming a circular, sustainable and adaptive future.
The biggest floating office in the world, folks. Impressive achievement. Thank you very much for doing that. Okay, we've heard what's gone into creating the nerve center of the Global Center on Adaptation. What about creating this entire summit? What's gone into that? Mr. Lapperre, why did the Netherlands really get behind this initiative on adaptation?
Well, I think the main reason is that the Netherlands is to a certain extent a country built on adaptation. For many years, like actually many other countries in the world, like ourselves, densely populated in a river delta, we have to deal with reality, namely rising sea levels and also rising river levels. So especially in a country like ours where 60%, over half of our country, is potentially at risk for flooding, I actually live and work below sea level. So we have to work on this every day. We do so. And at the same time, we have the ambition to share knowledge and learn from others around the world. And I think that is exactly why we thought to organize this conference and all the work we do in this field of adaptation. We work, for example, with Bangladesh and Vietnam, which are also deltas, on a delta plan, sharing our experiences. But also in areas where disaster has stricken, like Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, quite a lot of Dutch knowledge institutes and other Dutch expertise has been used to rebuild cities after disaster has struck. So that is, I think, the reason why we do this. And one last point I'd like to share with you, because I suppose many people looking at this and listening to this think of the Netherlands as that low-lying delta in northwestern Europe, which we are. But that's not the full story. The Kingdom of the Netherlands also consists of 6 very vulnerable islands in the Caribbean, which have their own adaptation challenge. Some of them are in the path of hurricanes. So also our Caribbean parts of the country are very vulnerable, and that's I think why we can also work with them on the specific challenges that countries, small island states have. Yeah, I think it's a great point that you make there. And is the leadership role that the Netherlands is taking when it comes to adaptation something that you want to kind of pass the baton with, or do you see the Netherlands as really spearheading this for the next few years? Well, what we have tried to do is to really ensure that coalitions are built around certain adaptation themes. Think of nature-based solutions, or finance, or water, or climate resilient infrastructure. And for example, in the field of water and climate resilient infrastructure, we do indeed have the ambition to continue our work. And we also will in the other themes. But what I think is the biggest gain of this conference is that coalitions are there to do it together, and not just each of us on their own. And talking about the roles that we need to play in this framework, how does this summit relate to, let's say, COP26 coming up and that? Well, we actually have meetings with our UK colleagues almost every other week to discuss how we can ensure that what we do here, the action orientation we have here, will also feed into the work of COP26 later this year in Glasgow. And Prime Minister Johnson is, of course, joining the leaders segment later today, and so will a number of other colleagues at the UK side that work on COP26. Okay. So how hopeful are we all? How hopeful are you? What do you hope for as a kind of takeaway from this summit?
Well, being a leader of a city is you must be optimistic. If not, leave the office. So it's really one conclusion. Be optimistic, mobilize forces in your city, citizens' engagement. I'm happy that as we speak, the Ministry of Lapperre is paying for at least 1 billion euros a year in my region to make the region stable, having the largest port in the Western Hemisphere, with billions and billions and billions of private investments. We have to protect that. And we do that from the knowledge that we cannot win from Mother Nature. So we have to learn to live with Mother Nature, and that within a certain boundaries. So it's really important to have that knowledge. A lot of my colleagues in the world focus on what we call mitigation, buying electric buses, and then yes, we are there. We have a party. Fine, we do that. We buy as a city also electric buses, but the focus must be really fundamental.
Yeah,
and
we talked about this earlier. The kind of change of mindset.
And I have the desire and the wish to wish all my colleagues in the world the way of collaboration we have with the Dutch national government. I'm leading a regional body that is discovering how to do things, and then we deliver the bill to the national government. We never can pay a city for billions, and then we need the parliament. It's really about a kind of a national consciousness and a national collaboration. So I wish that my colleagues in the world will have more or less the same collaboration with their own national or federal governments and stay positive. The second lesson is, this is
that's a long first lesson, Mr. Aboutaleb.
Yeah, but just one sentence.
Okay.
This is not about losing money. This is about creating new opportunities and new jobs.
Yeah.
The investing in this domain means new economy, new jobs, new incomes for citizens.
Okay. Is the money that is being that the city is benefiting from your ministry, is that flowing down to businesses like yours, Nanne? Are you being supported enough with your climate adaptive ambitions?
Yes, for sure. And I also think that definitely the municipality of Rotterdam and also the Dutch government in general are eager to support innovation in climate industries. I think what's very important also that we always need to think about planning and design. I think that's also what we've learned in the Netherlands. We are also a country of planners and engineers and designers, and I think we're realizing more and more that we also need to work with nature to create a really good balance between let's say contemporary life and nature.
Yeah.
And I think that will be probably the big challenge for the coming years.
Yeah. I'm also really interested in that topic, nature-based solutions, and we'll be talking about that in one of the CAS Talks later on today. Listen, thank you very much, all of you, for your hopeful, optimistic, ambitious plans for the future. Let's find out just how ambitious, although technically he is our outgoing Prime Minister right now, Prime Minister Rutte of the Netherlands. Let's find out if he shares our optimism. There's a video message from him which we're going to run.
Hi. My name is Mark Rutte and I'm Prime Minister of the Netherlands. I have an important message for you about our changing climate, about our planet and its people who are experiencing unprecedented heat, rain, storms and droughts. A quarter of my country lies below sea level. For centuries, we have kept our nation safe by building dikes, dams and ultra-modern flood defenses. So we know what we are talking about when it comes to coping with water and extreme weather. But nowadays, simply coping is not enough. Sea level is rising and the weather is becoming more extreme every year. All around the world, people are feeling the effects of climate change, despite our efforts to slow it down. Our climate has changed and we need to change with it. And we have to do it now. If we don't learn to deal with the consequences of climate change, if we can't adapt, the impact will be disastrous. I'm an optimist and I believe we can adapt to climate change if we work together. That's why the Netherlands is hosting the Climate Adaptation Summit. On the 25th and the 26th of January, together with many global leaders, I will be launching a comprehensive adaptation action agenda. But we also need your help, your expertise and knowledge to accelerate our adaptation actions. So please join us.
Okay. Thank you very much. So he does share our ambitions, but it remains a little general for my tastes because, when it comes to climate adaptation, the devil is in the detail. So to find out just how much climate change is affecting the most vulnerable communities in the world, I'd like to bring in an additional speaker, and that is Mrs. Shinaz Musa. Shinaz Musa is the director of the NGO South, South and North. Mrs. Musa, have I pronounced your name correctly? I apologize if not.
No, totally correct. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Good. I'm curious about your experience from an NGO perspective, Mrs. Musa. How important is the role of grassroots organizations?
Yeah. So thank you for the question, and also I'm deeply grateful to be on this platform, speaking at a time when it is critical that we start moving towards climate action on the ground. So like you say, what we've heard for the last 30 minutes is quite high level, but actually we do need to start getting into the detail, not just in these talks, but also globally, where if we want to start realizing the real positive impacts of all our actions. So if you look at it, many vulnerable and marginalized communities live in poverty, and often they're at the base of global supply chains where they are vulnerable to the climate shocks. And sometimes decisions where they bear the brunt are made elsewhere. So in short, these communities are vulnerable to the climate change impacts, and at the moment they're also having to deal with COVID-19 as a stressor. But what we do know is that these communities for decades have been adapting to all sorts of stresses. One of them, and the most common one now, is climate. So communities are adapting, and there is a big call that these actions are amplified and that it's supported for impact. So if you look at what I like to call the adaptation chain, and this is just coming out from lessons that we've seen across the programs we work with, but there's a planning stage, there's a responding stage, and then there's a recovery. So if you look globally, most of the community-based adaptation interventions happens in that middle responding pillar. And that is because the communities are hit by the climate stressor, and then they need to respond to that. So the way that communities do this is that they have different responding strategies, and it's often based on the context that they find themselves in. And these strategies span multiple social domains of resilience. And so at the core of the adaptation, communities need to access capital, and this is both financial and social capital. They need to be flexible. So they try something. If that doesn't work, they need to change that strategy so that they do adapt. There's also the need where they need to, there's a willingness to influence change. And then also very, very strongly, and it's come out now with COVID, is the capacity to organize themselves collectively and to mobilize their responses. And very, very importantly, what we're seeing is that community-based organization, such as women and youth groups, and especially your grassroots movements, are key to building your adaptation responses.
I can just interrupt for a second, Mrs. Musa.
Yes.
I think you're highlighting lots of things that these communities are doing already. They're using their creativity and innovation in order to respond to the already changing climate, but they need the support of organizations such as yours and other NGOs. And at this point, let me just bring in a video message from the executive director of Oxfam France, Mrs. Cécile Duflot, because we asked her earlier this week how climate change is affecting the most vulnerable communities worldwide in their network. So let's just hear what she had to say.
Thank you. That is a very good question. Adaptation is absolutely critical. As the climate crisis is here, and it is already impacting the lives and income of communities who depend on climate natural resources for their existence. Poor countries and communities who have contributed least to the climate crisis are already paying the highest price. But they need the resources to adapt. Finance for climate adaptation literally is a lifeline for communities in developing countries. However, rich countries are failing to provide this much needed support in adaptation. Oxfam has been tracking the flow of climate finance in the past decade, since the 100 billion goal commitment was made, which underpins the Paris Agreement. And one of our concerning findings is, aside from the finance falling short, that climate finance for adaptation, as compared to mitigation, is very low, and worryingly, oftentimes provided in the form of loans rather than grants. That is simply unacceptable. Why should poor countries take out a loan to address a crisis mostly caused by the excess carbon emissions of rich countries? Finance that should be helping countries respond to climate change should not be harming them by contributing to rising debt levels. The summit paper talks about delivering enhanced ambition. I am very pleased about that, as indeed ambition needs to be boosted, and we need to ensure it be delivered to address the needs of local communities and the needs of women, men, and young people, as unfortunately, despite the lofty words, it is so often does not. So I am very much looking forward to the declarations that will be presented shortly. May they include increased ambition for public finance, and may that new money not relabeled already existing funds. Thank you.
Yes, and I don't think Cecile is the only one looking forward to the declarations that are going to come out of this summit. Mrs. Musa, just to wrap up, I wish we had more time to hear from you, but what would the best outcome of this summit look like for you?
Yeah. So linking into what the previous speaker said on the video, it's about the financing. And I think what will be a brilliant outcome if there is some sort of a declaration in terms of how the public and the private sector can work together to ensure that adaptation is funded.
Well, that was very clear. Thank you very much, Mrs. Musa. And we share that ambition as well. Wish you all the best. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, we've heard from some senior representatives, should we say. I think it's very important to talk about the younger generation, because you guys are going to be the ones who are going to have to make adaptation second nature. So in this section, we have two youth representatives here and one joining us via video. Natalia Gomez is the youth representative from Costa Rica, and she's also the co-chair of the Youth Task Force of the NDC. And maybe shortly you can just remind me what NDC is, because I've forgotten again. And Mr. Dennis Janssen, who is also a UN youth delegate on sustainable development. And leading this discussion will be the wonderful Hajar Yagkoubi.
Yes. Well, indeed, first off, I do agree with you as well, Ikenna. I think it's one of the more important segments for today to talk with young people about this. Natalia, maybe if I can start with you. Obviously, you're the co-chair of the Youth Task Force of the NDC Partnership. If you would have to say, like, in your opinion, what do you think that the role is of young people in the entire climate adaptation discussion?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And during the Youth Engagement Plan development of the NDC partnership, we found that, well, young people should be at the heart of the climate plans, as all of we know, but not just because we will be dealing or facing the worst impacts of the climate change, but also because we have the solutions, we have the innovation. Many are going out from the universities, and we talk about technology. We want to bring solutions, we want to bring new technologies, and we want to help. I think that our role is more than the ones that will suffer the impacts. we are the ones that will be giving the solution. And also that's why we care about capacity building, we care about formal education, about climate change, and we really want to and help to build resilient communities.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and definitely, indeed, we're not just the ones experiencing the effects, but we're also the ones with the solutions. Indeed, I very much like that. Dennis, turning to you, because we're some sort of a colleague, right?
Yeah.
You're the current youth representative for the Netherlands. I'm the former one, but maybe just for the people watching at home, very shortly, what does a youth representative do?
So as a youth representative, it is my task to engage with youth, listen to their voices, and then amplify these and make sure that these are heard on a high level conferences, for example, like this one.
Yeah, so you're perfectly in the right place here.
Yeah.
And maybe also for you, like in your opinion, if you'd have to say very shortly, what do you think is the role of young people in the adaptation discussion?
Well, to me, I think the role of young people should be the same as non-young people. I mean, we are also part of this society, and as is said before, you know, this will be an issue for the rest of our lives probably.
Yeah.
And while we may not have a big part in you know, causes, that's not really important here. It's important that we work together to see, you know, intergenerational cooperation to make sure that we can live with these effects.
Yeah, okay, thank you indeed. Natalia, turning back to you, because the Youth Task Force that you're the co-chair of, a big thing and a good thing, I think, indeed, to add that strategy in the NDC partnership. Through that process, you've worked a lot with local governments. How was their youth participation game? I'm especially curious about that, and if you have some key takeaways for us, for some politicians listening, and how they can really have a constructive dialogue with young people when working together.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, NDC Partnership Youth Engagement Plan, we did a global consultation. So we look for inputs from youth people around all of them were really motivated and wanted to help, give solutions. But, well, there is always that gap in people and policymakers. So we want help to get closer or to give them confidence, but related to local governments, I can tell my own experience. The local government mine is called Oriamono, and we have like a really good connection with a mayor here, because we have an objective, so we look to give solutions, we look for them. I think that we have sent many emails, and that's the way we can get to the mayors, and also to look for changes, just to try and also to look for the technical people working at the municipalities.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you. Before we say goodbye, though, to you guys, there's a question from the chat. This question comes from Esther Blau, and she says, "We, the Netherlands, are also a country of people that want more and never want to, or don't want to sacrifice our current welfare system. So how do we commit everyone to climate adaptation?" Perhaps you'd like to speak to that, Mr. Lapperre.
Well, I think climate adaptation is something that every single person can work on. Governments have their role to play, building flood defenses, for an example, or ensuring that infrastructure is indeed climate adaptive, is climate resilient. But you can also do it in your own garden, if you have one, by taking out a piece of pavement and planting a tree. As small as it might be, that is a contribution to climate adaptation.
Yeah.
When you replace your roof, make it a green one. So I think this is something every single person can work on.
So it's not about sacrificing, it's about, you know, finding creative ways to...
Well, I think in many ways a greener living environment is often being perceived as a better environment. than a very stony concrete environment.
Yeah.
So you could even say that it has its advantages if you do it in the right way.
Absolutely. So we're enriching our environment. We're not sacrificing it. I hope that answers your question, Esther. On that note, I'd like to say goodbye to our youth representatives. Hajar will be seeing you shortly, because it is very nearly time to kick off the Climate Adaptation Summit officially with our high-level speakers. We're going straight over to Sasha de Boer, looking beautiful. What a very appropriate green jacket there. Love it.
It's all green, thank you.
So, T minus a couple of minutes, I don't know. How long have we got to go?
It starts at 2 o'clock.
Okay, and how are preparations going?
Very well.
Has everyone showed up?
The table is empty, but everybody will be here. They're just behind the camera, waiting for me to join me.
Ah, good. And I heard there's been a last-minute addition. Leonardo DiCaprio is going to be there live.
Oh yeah, he will be here. I just talked to him.
Oh, see, I can't throw a professional off her game. Look at that. Not even a little shiver. Fantastic. Now, have a great session. Looking forward to watching you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, Ikenna.
Goodbye. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was your very first CAS Talk, the very first one of the Climate Adaptation Summit. I hope we've managed to set the tone for the rest of the next couple of days. Thank you very much to all of our guests for their insights. Thank you, Mr. Lapperre, Dennis, I should say. Janssen and Hajar. Wonderful. And we will see you again very soon for another CAS Talk.